contact, shared needles, and blood transfusions.
Danny was probably the first person I knew who had AIDS.
I thought I would never have sex again. With another, or I'll ever meet somebody who would want to be with me.
This disease came on the heels of gay liberation, and now you're being told you can't have sex. I think that was made people very angry.
And you'd see a friend, and then you'd look at them and they were wasting away. Or you'd see one of your neighbors, healthy young man, and then he had lesions all over him. And I remember I was visiting my grandmother, and she got a call and one of her friends had died. And she said to me, Ricky, you don't know what it's like to have all your friends. And I said to her, yes, I do.
Danny would be in and out of the hospital in the years ahead, fighting off different illnesses caused by the virus.
It was very lonely.
In the fall of 1988, Lori Cannon and Danny traveled to Washington, D.C. to see the quilt. Danny had been living with AIDS for 10 months. The quilt had more than quadrupled in size in just 1 year.
Nancy and old Ronald Reagan took their little helicopter and flew out over the ellipse and spent the whole weekend away, and never once acknowledging the quilt.
The Reagan administration was apathetic to the AIDS crisis, and after 7 years, the federal response was still uncoordinated and inadequate. During that fateful trip to D.C., Danny discovered a group that was taking matters into their own hands. They called themselves ACT UP, which stood for the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And they were protesting at the Food and Drug Administration, demanding the agency speed up approval of the drug AZT. At the time, it was the only hope for someone with AIDS.
There was a glimmer of hope.
It might have prolonged your life enough to get to the next drug, to the next drug, to the next drug.
ACT UP was the scream to the silence and tears of the quilt.
It was a three-ring circus, actually, of activism. You have something going on over here, you have something going on over there.
When you're fighting for your life, nothing is irrational.
It was theater, but it was so finely honed.
I went to Washington to see the quilt, and it just snowballed from there.
It was a new day in Chicago. When Danny came back, he was a man on a mission.
Danny had found his purpose. Fight to improve the lives of people like him, people living with AIDS. He approached a local AIDS Direct Action group and convinced them to create the first Chicago chapter of ACT UP.
The dynamic energy of ACT UP inspired Danny, of what he thought we could do.
ACT UP showed the nation a style of civil disobedience that shined a light on the neglect and marginalization of people with AIDS.
In a world that had suddenly gotten dark, hopeless, suddenly this power appeared.
What ACT UP did is showed a different light on gay people who are standing up and being proud and throwing their shoulders back and telling folks, do not with us.
You take one look in the eyes of any of the ACT UP folks, and you were seeing something we did not have. It was folks who were literally fighting for their lives. And we're not going to take no from anybody.
We hadn't seen that before.
None of us knew how to respond. ACT UP would go after folks they thought were not doing the right things. And if that included gay people, so be it. Scared them out of most people in our community.
Danny jumped into actions in Chicago and around the country.
I'm real proud to be sort of down in the trenches with everyone else. I mean, this is a war.
Stop killing us! Stop killing us! We're not gonna take it anymore!
And I'm not on the sidelines. I feel that the movement needs me, and I need the movement.
Danny would wage the war on multiple fronts, out in the streets, and also through his art. He put pen to paper and began creating editorial cartoons.
The cartoons reached a wide audience, and they had an impact that something ACT UP didn't have to do. All you had to do was be a person who picked up Gay Chicago magazine and opened it.
His cartoons were sort of the visual editorial of a lot of the things that ACT UP was doing, in that his cartoons were very much like a zap, a political action, a one-time thing designed usually to embarrass.
I remember the cartoon with the ACT, with the guy pulling the wagon, Bring Out Your Dead.
Within months, Danny's cartoons were published in gay newspapers around the country, from New York to San Francisco.
I am coast to coast now. I'd like to hit all the markets in the United States, the gay markets, and maybe cross over to straight press.
His cartoons were witheringly honest, and no one was off limits.
Danny's cartoons were powerful. They were raw, they were angry, they were funny, they were sarcastic. The one I've always remembered the most shows Bush the First and Barbara reading the newspapers, and it says some appalling number of dead from AIDS, and George says nothing in the news today. Danny was brilliant. He was brilliant.
When I found out from him how little he got paid to do those, and I mean, it's sort of a travesty of underground journalism, I guess, but I think if he even got $40 for a cartoon, I'd be surprised.
As soon as we can get done with the ads, we can go pick up the coffee somewhere. So that's going to free up everyone who's going to put coffins, or fill on coffins. So I'll help with Zoe.
I got to know Danny through those meetings. He just said, hey, look, I'm a person with AIDS. I might not be here in 6 months. Let's get this done now. We had a lot in common. We were the same age. We were both little guys. We both came from dysfunctional families. We both were HIV positive.
When I talk to people now about ACT UP, people are, like, have this notion that it was thousands of people. It was dozens of key people.
And those key people were experienced street activists. But Danny also knew that political change couldn't happen without help from inside the halls of power. So, he courted a handful of mainstream gay and lesbian advocates who were well-connected and politically savvy.
We could be heard by some people that didn't want to hear from Danny. And it also worked out where, you know, if people didn't listen to us, if we didn't get our meetings, well, okay, you know, Danny will be visiting you. You know?
Lori Dittman was the director of a respected progressive political watchdog group. Danny called her constantly.
At all hours. I mean, there wasn't any, like, you know, pattern. It was just kind of, I think, whenever he was just like, you know, I need to talk to Dittman and she needs to do more.
Danny worked with bar owner and longtime civil rights advocate Art Johnston.
Danny was a natural leader. Whatever Danny wanted you to do, you would do. You could not ignore Danny Sotomayor.
And Danny also tapped City Hall lobbyist Rick Garcia.
We'd work on strategy together. The suits and the activist were in constant contact and supported one another.
With a powerful team assembled, Danny was ready to take action.
So horrible. I immediately tore it down CTA.
Danny wanted to give the public the facts about safe sex instead of preying on fear.
We contacted the CTA and asked them to meet with us several times to talk about these posters, and they would have nothing to do with us.
There's a lot of work to be done beforehand.
So he got started on his own ad campaign and rallied ACT UP to get behind him.
Danny created the placards that would fit on the city buses.
Buses! Save it for the buses!
They were in English, they were in Spanish. All of it was sex positive, yet informative and educational.
I remember this one poster I always got a kick out of it. It had like the dancing condom in it.
Wrap it up! Wrap it up!
The group gathered near a Northside bus terminal on a Saturday in May 1989.
Hey!